So at midday today, the Bank of England is predicted to deliver its 10th interest rate rise in a row, likely bringing it to 4%. The move will be a continuation of the quickest series of hikes for more than 30 years. So with me now in the studio to break it all down is Liam Halligan. Why are they doing this, Liam? Give me the idiot's guide.
You're not an idiot, Beth.
Treat me like I'm an idiot.
And our GBNews viewers and listeners certainly aren't idiots. So the Bank of England has raised interest rates 9 times in a row now because it's trying to bear down on inflation. It's trying to push inflation down by pretty much deliberately slowing down the economy, making it harder for people to borrow money, harder for demand to expand in order to try and keep those price rises under control and rein in the cost of living crisis. In the years before the COVID pandemic, interest rates were below 1%. They then went even lower during the period of lockdown to 1/4%, and they've since gone up 9 successive times. There's the graph there. We can see the COVID lockdown if you're watching on television, 1/4%. Then there's those 9 successive rises to tackle inflation to 3.5% where we are now. I expect to rise to 4%. I'll be at the Bank of England at 12 noon when that decision is made to report that up to the minute. But I actually think interest rates haven't got that much further to go up. I've been long predicting an interest rate peak of 4.25%, 4.25% later this spring.
This is what I don't understand. Normally, we have inflation because there's so much monetary and economic activity going on. People are buying. There's a lot of money sloshing around the system and it gets hot and they try to cool it down, right? That's not what's happening now. No one's spending it. Well, what we are spending has so little value. But people are being careful with their money right now. We don't have much spare disposable income. So why are they doing this?
Inflation this time round is multifaceted. It's not only because there has been a kind of wall of post-lockdown demand. There was a surge of demand. There is actually still very, very strong demand, but that hit a kind of wall of, it hit like a sort of limits on supply. So the global economy couldn't supply what people were demanding because of all those lockdown supply chain issues. Production needed to be rebooted. Here in the UK in particular, we've had a lot of people not going back to work. The whole economy is discombobulated. And then on top of that, the Bank of England has also spent those years since the global financial crisis of 2008, massively expanding what we call its balance sheet, so-called quantitative easing. That's also inflationary, so the bank's got to rein that in as well. Look, inflation is now coming down. We've gone from over 11 to just over 10%. I think the next inflation number, when it comes out for January, will be in single digits. There's still a long way to go until we get down to the 2% inflation target that the government sets for the Bank of England. But I do think by the middle of the year and towards the back end of this year, we're going to see inflation of around 5% or so. And that will allow the Bank of England to say, look, it's come down all this way. It's obviously coming down. We can now start to lower interest rates again in order to try and give the economy a bit of a boost and give people a break, frankly.
When Rishi Sunak set out his 5-point plan just a few weeks ago, that involved bringing down inflation. And he basically staked a claim to take credit for that when it happens. Will he be able to take
It's a bit like saying in January, oh, it's going to be sunnier than January and June and it will all be because of me. I mean, look, it's almost an arithmetic inevitability that inflation will come down because the big price rises of last year kind of drop out of the numbers because inflation is about, rates of change rather than actual levels. So I do think he'll hit that target. But it's going to be very difficult to get inflation down from around 5% or so down to the 2%, which is the Bank of England's target. I think that will take at least until the middle of next year. But I do think this cost of living squeeze is going to abate, even though, we know it's still really hitting lots of people. And look, today, Shell's just announced £32 billion of profits.
You read my mind.
That's, globally, but still in the UK, they're making a lot of money. We're seeing oil prices come down. We're seeing now wholesale gas prices come down, yet still petrol and diesel prices are high. And, of course, utility bills are very high as well.
I was thinking about you this morning when I was reading this, Liam.
Always wise.
I often think about you when I come across these financial stories and I think, what would the oracle of all things economics think of this? We were talking about the fact that all of these utility companies have we upped our direct debits, right, to meet these increasing prices. Then the prices come down and people have been really careful and used less. So British Gas have a lot of our cash. Is that why Centrica, who own British Gas, have now said that they will have £1 billion of cash on its balance sheet for this year, and that has put their share price up to make them the top riser of the FTSE 100. Is that because of us lending them our money?
They'll probably deny it, but I would say eyeballing from outside, their current accounts haven't yet been published. They're published with the delay, of course, like all company accounts. But it does seem as if that's the case. That's how strongly I'd put it. A lot of these utility companies, they are taking cash from us. We're in a situation now where the government cap is about to be adjusted, and yet even though wholesale prices have come down a lot, they're now, for gas, below where they were before Vladimir Putin invaded Ukraine just under a year ago, and yet utility bills are sky high, far higher than they were before last February. So I think the market isn't working properly. Again, the utility companies would deny this. I would suggest that the market is rigged. We're getting a lot of cheaper, heavily subsidised but cheaper renewable energy coming through now, and yet it's still... we're charged for that renewable energy as if it was gas-fired energy. Yeah. So it's almost as if the market doesn't work. And it's not just households, Bev, it's companies. There's going to be no price cap for almost all companies after April. I was in Kent earlier this week. Yeah. We showed the report that I did. And you got a guy there, family-run business. He's trying to run a pub, gastro pub. They're all in, all their savings. They've got some nice rooms, weekends away and so on. It's called the Dog at Wingham. Mark Bridgen's utility bills have gone up from 30 grand a year for his pub and restaurant before the war in Ukraine. And now they're 80 grand a year, right? What an increase with the price cap. When the price cap goes in April, 120 grand a year. On utility bills, a 4 times increase. No small business can withstand that. The government needs to understand what's happening to small and medium-sized enterprises, not the heavy energy users like steel makers. They will get additional subsidies, but just regular businesses for whom a utility bill was a kind of small part of their cost base is now the looming hole in the middle of their balance sheets that will crush these firms.
It really just feels... I know it's not deliberate to close these small businesses, but it just looks like an act of national self-harm at the moment.
Or neglect. It's neglect, isn't it? Small businesses, SMEs, small and medium-sized enterprises, as I often champion here on GBNews and in my other writing, they employ 2/3 of us, right? They generate half our growth. They are the hotbeds of innovation, effort and drive. These are the companies that push the British economy forward.
We are a nation of shopkeepers, right?
We are. And it's a cliche, but it's true. Yeah. We're retailers, we're innovators, we're potterers, if you like. These small companies, they don't only provide world-class services, they're also where a lot of innovation happens. Yeah. So many of them were monstered during lockdown, absolutely ravaged during the COVID pandemic. For a lot of these self-employed people, no furlough for them. So they suffered. Yeah. They kept their workforces on in many cases, and they're desperate now to get back in the saddle and get this British economy moving. They're being hit by business rates, which they have to pay, even if they don't make any money at all. They're about to be walloped by a 6 percentage point rise in corporation tax from 19 to 25%, something which I think Rishi Sunak should freeze in his March budget, by the way. And I'm sort of campaigning for that in my own quiet and retiring and shy way. But these SME businesses, ministers have to understand that they drive the economy and they are very, very influential swing voters in their own communities. They're pragmatic. They don't care who they vote for. They vote for what's best for business. And it's clear that many of them now are suffering.
OK. All right. Thank you so much, Liam.